What is good, MexitPlanners? Thank you for joining me for another edition of the Yucatan News Weekly Update. Yucatan set a new daily record, and it ain't good, y'all. Let's get it. So in the state of Yucatan, there was a new record set for almost 400 new daily cases of COVID yesterday, January the 11th. This is the largest single number that we've had in the state since the beginning of the pandemic. The previous record was 299 cases on September 10th, 2021. If you remember in previous Yucatan News Weekly updates, we talked about the increase in COVID cases due to Omicron. One of the observations that I made was that the testing site at the city center shopping plaza had lines wrapped around the building. Well, it's been reported that the testing site administers 300 tests daily and 40% of those are positive for COVID-19. That is 120 new people per day at one testing site in the city. There was also a report of 3 private labs that provide over 750 tests per day. They say that the increase started on Christmas Eve and has continued well past the 4th of January. That's over 7,500 tests as of January the 4th, with more than 40% of those testing positive, or around 3,000 people in 10 days. Despite the numbers reported in the paper, if you look at the labs, you will see that the numbers are much higher. Some of the reasons for increased tests is that because of the holidays, many people came into contact with family members that tested positive. Others needed tests to travel. And lastly, companies are now requiring a negative test to return to work because of the increased gatherings of the holiday season. In fact, Mexico is the country with the highest Omicron infection rate in Latin America, followed by Chile. The areas most infected are those tourist areas or hotspots of Quintana Roo, where Cancun and the Riviera Maya are located, and Baja California Sur, where Los Cabos is located. There have not been any restrictions applied to those areas, and many tourists from the United States are flocking to those destinations and bringing with them Omicron. There is not a testing requirement to enter Mexico, unlike it is to go back to the United States. Mexico is also the 5th in world deaths from COVID, behind the USA, Brazil, India, and Russia, according to the Johns Hopkins University. Last week, 140 Aeromexico employees tested positive for COVID-19. 260 flights have been canceled since January 6th, just last week, due to the airline employees testing positive and not having enough staff to replace them. The federal traffic light, or semaphore, for the state of Yucatan has been changed from green to yellow. Y'all, this is serious. Although the state traffic light remains at green for now and everything remains open, they've asked for voluntary curtailing of activities and social engagements, but nothing has been put in place as of yet for the state. You got to understand that here in Merida, we're in the midst of MeridaFest, which is the 480-year celebration of the city's founding. And we're in the middle of a huge month-long celebration, which ends on the 23rd of January. Who's to say that that the semaphore light for the state won't change in January? The Yucatan is currently in the 4th wave of the pandemic, and nationally, even AMLO, the president of Mexico, confirmed in his morning presser that he has tested positive for a 2nd time for COVID-19. Yesterday, the mayor of Merida has tested positive for COVID-19, as it was announced yesterday in the paper. While the number of confirmed cases rises, it doesn't appear that the deaths are rising at the same level, which is consistent with other countries have seen with Omicron. The hospitalization rate is not increasing as rapidly as well with this Omicron variant. Tomorrow, the State Board of Education will meet to discuss if delaying in-person classes for 2 more weeks makes sense. With cases at an all-time high in Merida, Yucatan, it seems the reason that they would delay in-person classes for a couple of more weeks. This thing is serious. This is the worst we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic in terms of the number of cases. The good news is hospitalizations aren't happening at the same rate, so the hospitals remain relatively open and free of COVID patients. But I can tell you that if that number starts to change in any way, I suspect that the state government will look at implementing different rules and policies in terms of the curfew restrictions, going back to yellow, or whatever they need to do. Stay tuned, y'all. Switching gears, there was a survey in the media channels that asked, do you think that classes should continue virtually? 74.6% of the people said absolutely yes. 25.4% of the people said no. This week, the second doses of the vaccines will be administered to ages 12 to 15. So that's a good news. And I think one of the reasons we haven't seen hospitalizations increase is because a majority of the population, now ages 12 all the way through seniors, have received at least a second dose of the vaccine. And the seniors are now also receiving boosters. So that's all very good news. This spread in the Omicron variant is starting to affect travel into Merida, as well as just daily business life. So here's another good example. Switching gears a little bit, many travelers who arrive at the Merida airport on the last flight of the night, which happens to land around 11 o'clock, face a problem catching a ride to their final destinations in the city. Ride-sharing services are not permitted to enter the airport, so you can't take a ride-sharing service, Uber, Diddy, or InDriver from the airport to your home, unless you walk. There's a good half a mile walk from the terminal of the airport to the outside of the federal zone, which is at the main street. That's the only place that an Uber, Diddy, or InDriver can pick you up. In order to pick up at the airport, you either need to be in your private personal car, have a friend pick you up, or you have to take one of the 3 licensed taxi vendors that work at the airport. Now, the issue with that is there are only 145 federally licensed taxis that can pick up at the airport amongst the 3 companies. There are 3 flights that arrive about the same time, around 11 o'clock, 11 p.m. every night, with about 400 passengers total. This would present a problem because there's just simply not enough federally licensed cab drivers who can take passengers from the airport to their homes on a normal day with only 145. And many of the drivers are also reporting that they're being tested positive for COVID-19 recently. So like many of the airline workers, this is creating an even greater issue. In response to this problem, there is now a bus service that has 3 25-passenger vans or buses operated by the Audio Transportation Company that drops off in the Central Hotel Zone. There are 2 stops, one at Parque Santa Lucia and the other at Paseo 60. So that would get you really close to many of the hotels in Merida in the central area. There are plans for this service to become a permanent service pending approval, but right now it's put in place in an emergency situation. The cost of the bus is only 50 pesos or around $2.50. Typically, when I take a licensed cab from the airport to my house, I've paid as much as 350 pesos or about $17 or so to go from South Merida to my home in North Merida. $2.50 is a good price, but you're on a bus with 25 other passengers and there are only 2 stops that drop off in Centro. So if you got to get the North Metro or North Merida at, say, the Residence Inn or the Hampton Inn or one of the hotels that's up by the Galleria's Mall, you need to take a taxi or one of the airport shuttles. All right, switching gears to an interesting cultural story. So bullfighting is a sport which is still performed here in Merida and throughout the Yucatan. Like in Spain, it is a very controversial sport and has been outlawed in some parts of Mexico, like Mexico City. I attended my first bullfight here in Merida in the 2019 season at the Plaza del Toros. It was very, very different from what I saw when I went to a bullfight in Madrid, Spain. It was definitely like watching AA baseball versus the major leagues. There was a clear difference in skill level. Well, last week, there was an incident at an event in Tisben known as the Baxal Toro, which literally means taunting of the bull. A man had been drinking with some buddies. He decided to participate in the event with the bull. Unfortunately, he was gored and didn't survive his injuries. These events are being met with increasing scrutiny and controversy as they take place in Yucatan throughout many pueblos and ferias during this time of the year. It's increasingly fallen out of favor, certainly in the more urban metropolitan areas. It would not surprise me that if this area was also one that, moving to a global international scale, decided to also outlaw bullfighting and things of that nature. If you got one piece of information that you were like, man, I'm glad to know that, do me a favor and hit the like button. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the people that see me out and about, that stop and tell me how much you appreciate the Yucatan News Weekly updates and all the other videos I make. I really appreciate it sincerely. Until next time, MexitPlans Monty, I'm out.